In the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The first item on the agenda is public participation.
Hi, I'm Nancy Leinwand from 149 Lowry's Lane. I'm here to remind you and our public audience of the Garrett Hill Coalition's project in Macrone Park this weekend. Saturday from 9 to 3, we'll be constructing a rain garden and planting it. And we have Bryn Mawr Boy Scout Troop 19 doing some of the work. Everybody's invited to come join in or just watch for a while. In the springtime, we'll install permanent interpretive signage there. So this project will capture stormwater and snow melt from the parking lot of Macrone Park, delay its run into the little stream there, Valley Run, and filter the pollutants out of the water to the best of its ability. I'd like to thank Steve Norsini and Kevin Kaczynski for their help, and remind the commissioners to remind their constituents to come on out. I think that the announcement is on the scroll so everybody can see it. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Any other public comment? And now we have I would like to get notice of an executive session preceding this Board of Commissioners meeting of October 22nd, 2012, where we were all present, but Elaine and Jim Higgins were not present, and we dealt with a personnel matter. Next, I'd like to have a motion to approval of the minutes.
I'll move to approve the Board of Commissioners meeting minutes for September 24th, 2012.
Second.
Mr. Chairman, if
Yes.
I may, there's a correction we'd like to make in the minutes. On page 5 under the Parks and Recreation, Commissioner Kevin Higgins' name was deleted from the opposed. The 4 who voted against the resolution were Commissioner Jim Higgins, Commissioner Fisher, Commissioner Nagel, and Commissioner Schaefer. We'd ask that be reflected in the minutes.
All right, that's reflected
So
in the motion.
moved. Yep.
Second. Any other commissioner comment?
Yeah, I have one. On the following page where it's my comments about the Cass Holloway proposal, I'd like to say that I will attempt to form a group, not form a group. There's a lot of things that have to happen. So I don't want to mislead anybody that there's a group already in progress or that I'm going to form it. I'm going to attempt to form one.
All right, any other commissioner comment? Public comment? All right, with those 2 additions, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes 5-0. Now we have a proclamation for National Friends of Library Week. Don?
So is Hannah Bell here? Hannah, would you meet me at the podium, please? Thank you. I'm going to read the proclamation from the Board of Commissioners. Whereas the Friends of the Radnor Library raise money that enables our library to move from good to great, providing the resources for additional programming, much-needed equipment, support for summer reading, and special events throughout the year. Whereas the work of the Friends highlights on an ongoing basis the fact that our library is a cornerstone of the community, providing opportunities for all to engage in the joy of lifelong learning and connect with thoughts and ideas of others from ages past to present. Whereas the Friends understand the critical importance of libraries and advocate to ensure our library is able to provide a wide variety of services for all ages, including access to print and electronic material, along with expert assistance in research, readers advisory, and children's services. Whereas 4 times a year, the Friends hold book sales that recycle thousands of books and media. Whereas the Friends' year-round gift of their time and commitment to the library sets an example for all in how volunteerism leads to positive civic engagement and the betterment of community. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Commissioners of Radnor Township proclaim October 21st through October 27th, 2012 as Friends of the Library Week in Radnor Township, and urges everyone to join the Friends of the Library and thank them for all they do to make our library and our community so much better. signed by Bill Spengler and the Township Manager. Thank
John,
you.
do you so move that resolution?
Yes, I move the
Do I have a
resolution.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
I thank you all. We're very proud to be an integral part of the Radnor community, the most used municipal building in Radnor. We are happy to have you come and see the new lights that are in the library, funded by the Friends. And we invite you all to our book sale on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th of November, and hope you will spend lots of money there. Thanks so much.
Next, we have a certificate of recognition to Rick Barker. John?
Rick, can you join me at the podium, please? Well, I want to talk informally for a moment. I guess it was about 4 years ago that I met Rick and Patty, his wife, when we first got involved in the Garrett Hill Overlay District process. And I've come to really appreciate all the value they bring to the community, not only in their leadership and taking the responsibilities on first, but also their continued service to the community. And Rick and Patty have announced that they'll be moving out of the township in maybe about a year or so. I'm going to talk them into staying longer. But as a result of having to get in that process of moving, Rick has had to resign his duties on the implementation committee. But I'll read the certificate of appreciation and then talk a little bit more. Whereas the Radnor Township would like to recognize that Rick Barker for his continued years of support. Rick has been involved in the Garrett Hill Implementation Committee and the Comprehensive Plan Implementation Committee for several years. Be it known, the Radnor Township Board of Commissioners commends Rick Barker and further acknowledges his role in improving Garrett Hill. This is to honor Rick Barker, and this is presented on the 22nd day of October 2012. You know, the plaque is a very nice thing. I'm very happy we're doing this for Rick, but it only begins to thank him and his family for the commitment they've made, and all the other volunteers of the Garrett Hill Implementation Committee and the Garrett Hill Steering Committee through the process that you took the community through a couple years ago. It was a process that took over 2 years to create a master plan for Garrett Hill and also to create new zoning that would create opportunity for Garrett Hill to revitalize itself. And this is a gift that I think is going to give on for decades. It may take decades to see the improvements, but the fact is, without this hard work that this committee did under Rick's chairmanship, we probably wouldn't have an opportunity like this. So, Rick, thank you from my heart to yours.
Thank you,
very
John.
much. And Rick will say a few words, I think. Just a few.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I suppose that it's a fitting punishment that in order to receive this recognition, I have to attend one last meeting. However, I think what's important to recognize here is that there are many committee chairs and many committee members who go unrecognized and have, in fact, certainly cumulatively put in a greater effort and maybe of more significance than I do, and do so on an ongoing basis. So I would like to accept this reward on behalf of all those who volunteer in local government. And there have been times when we have, as the Garrett Hill Steering Committee, as the Garrett Hill Coalition, tried to come up with a list of names so we could appropriately thank everyone personally with the mention. But this effort is one that we cannot undertake because we would invariably forget someone significant, because there were literally hundreds of people who participated in the process. And I saw my role as chair to be the one who ensured, who created an avenue of safety and comfort for the community to come forward and participate in local government as it really, I believe, truly should be, and not only to hear these voices, but to carefully consider them. And I'm proud that I believe that my committee accomplished this, again, a significant goal. It was more a product of what happened instead of my own individual effort. If anybody's individual effort should be recognized, it should be my spouse's and not my own, rest assured. However, I would like to say that again, it's a little embarrassing for me. You have to forgive me. I chose to speak off the cuff. It's the last chance I have to make an idiot of myself in public, perhaps. But I would like to take a short mention of my fellow committee members, and this would be from left to right, as I usually said. Jim Cornelio. Jim Cornelio was the E.F. Hutton of our committee. When he spoke, we listened, because he didn't speak often, but when he spoke, it was always with well-chosen words, very well-timed, and of import and significance. Rick Yulo. Now, Rick Yulo's, his eloquence and prescient clarity contributed greatly to our committee and community's efforts, not the least of which was for his clarion call for the township to hold clear title to Emlyn Tennell Park, a goal still worthy of consideration. Nancy Linewan, who you've heard from just moments ago, her intellect and her professional skills contribute greatly to the committee's effort, and she continues to help marshal the Garrett Hill Community Enhancement Trust. Betty Lou Nursini, who by definition resided at the confluence of the business and residential communities, often an unenviable role that she navigated with aplomb. Phil R., my vice chair, and who I am most indebted to for his sage advice, and also his ability to have me look at things from a new perspective, often at times when it was most needed, and of course for his superb organizational skills. There's Jerry O'Connor. He was, for me, the rock of our committee. He was always dependable, always reliable. Thank you, Jerry. Bob Adams. Bob Adams was always attentive to all correspondence. He was succinct and direct in his communication. Bob calls it like he sees it. And Lee Turner, who from the outset and throughout the process is one of the most admired and respected members of our community and committee, and with good reason. And I'd also like to mention our newest members, Paul Overbeck, who has long been a friend of the Garrett Hill Parks, and also Ryan Caffrey, who has most recently joined us. I would like to just read, in closing, a paragraph, short, from a resignation letter. And it is, if the Garrett Hill process has a legacy in Radnor Township, it is my sincerest hope that it be remembered for ensuring an open, transparent, truly public process. And that this type of process not only exemplifies fairness, but by its very nature produces the best possible outcomes. So I heartfeltly accept your recognition, not only on my behalf, but on all the local government volunteers. And I'll say to you now, without mentioning all of your names, you know who you are. Thank you again.
Our next item is the Church of the Savior, permission to have a temporary civic event sign at the intersection of Lancaster and North Wayne Avenues for their fall event on October 26, 2012. Can I have a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Do I have a
Second.
Commissioner comment?
There's no staff objection to this?
No, there's not.
Public comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes 5-0 with 2 absent. Next is a motion to approve the Wayne United Methodist Church Amazing Run 5K Run and Walk. Can I have a motion to approve that?
I'll move to approve the 5K run and walk.
Second?
I'll second.
Commissioner comment? Park and Rec comment? Public comment? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Passes 5-0 with two not here. Next is a Special Olympics request for waiver of detail administrative fee for providing police and extra duty services.
I'll move to approve the waiver of fees.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner comment?
Staff opinion on this?
There's no objection on this. I think this is a very good cause, very good program here, so there's no objection.
Public comment? All those in...
I just want to say thank you.
Well, you have to come to the mic to say thank you. You got to tell us who you are. I'm sorry.
Jack McCormick, I'm Vice President of Finance with the Special Olympics Pennsylvania, and I just want to thank the support of Radnor Township and the Police Department. This is a great event, and we hope you'll all be able to stop out if you haven't ever been there before. Thank you very much for listening.
Well, thank you for the work you do. We appreciate it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes 5-0 with two members absent. Next, I need authorization to waive fees for Common Cause PA.
I'll move to waive the fees for Common Cause PA.
Well, the staff is recommending that it be rejected, right, Bob?
That's correct. I recommend that this be denied.
Right. Can I just ask a process question?
Sure.
Did somebody ask you to put this on the agenda? Because from my point of view, if the staff thinks it should be rejected, it doesn't need to come here. It's only when it gets waived. So unless somebody asked you, or are you just doing this for purposes of transparency?
I think we've done that part as transparency, but also, too, there's been recommendations I've made to deny, and the board's overruled those, so that's why we brought this forward.
So I just a brief question. I read the application form. They claim their organization is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to promoting transparent and accountable government. It sounds an awful, just on my first read, without doing all the research, it sounds an awful lot like the League of Women Voters or other types of organizations. I feel, and I know that this board has waived fees for those organizations. So my only concern is that should we be giving the same opportunity to this group?
Well, you made the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Second. Any other commissioner comment?
Bob, tell us your reasoning for
Well, it's going
recommending denial.
Yeah, it's going to pass 3-2, so.
I want to hear his reason.
Yeah,
Did you hear
let's
the
not spend a
reason?
lot of
Maybe
time.
it'll pass 4-1.
Oh, okay.
Can you tell us the reason?
Sure. One is I think this is more political than what is determined as like the League of Women Voters. Second of all, I think that based on how it's submitted, based on their verbiage from their website, I don't think this fits the appropriate approval. It's not community-based. It's not like a community organization like we have here that the board has waived. So I think this is a little different.
So is this an outside organization just coming locally then?
That's correct. They are not
Yeah.
located here in the township.
And is it your opinion that they're not as nonpartisan as they claim?
Well,
No, it's a
Well,
matter of
that's
opinion.
really-
That would be a
that's
matter of
opinion.
opinion there.
Why?
they're headed by Bob Edgar, who's a great American.
I'm not to judge, but it just, if they claim to be nonpartisan and they're not, that's
They are
different.
nonpartisan.
They're a policy advocacy group. They're not nonpartisan if you look at what they have in their materials.
Okay. Any public comment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed. Passes 3-2 with two absent. Next, we have the
John Rice,
motion to accept.
what did they just
departmental
pass?
reports.
They don't know what they just passed, right?
Waiver of fees we passed.
Did they pass the waiver of the fee, or was the recommendation to deny the waiver?
No, authorization for waiver of fee is the motion, not denial.
Motion was to
That's-
waive the fee.
So the township will be waiving the fee.
Okay.
For this organization.
Does the agenda, do you first need to deny what's in here and then?
That's just a recommendation. What's on the agenda is authorization for waiver of
Let me-
fee. It's nothing
I
about
wanna
denial.
ask- I want to ask the solicitor.
You promised me you weren't going to ask any tough questions tonight.
Well, after,
I didn't say, you notice I didn't say dumb. I'm trying to be non-political here, you know?
The administration denied the waiver request, which I think Bob's done that before, and
Right.
Bob's been overruled before. So it's coming to you. If you look on the form, there's a little box where
I just want to make sure we're clear on what we voted.
Well, it was my motion
it
that
was a
matters,
3-2
not what
vote
the minutes-
to
not
approve the request for a waiver of the fee.
And you're comfortable how it worked?
Yes.
Now, if you want to work it the other way so it's denied, we can take another vote. That'd be good.
Motion to accept the departmental reports.
I move we accept the departmental reports.
Have a second?
I'll second that.
Second. Commissioner comment, public comment, all those in favor? Passes 5-0 with 2.
And thank you to all the departments and department heads for the hard work. A lot of great information in here. I still haven't actually read all of it because there's so much detail. We appreciate it, though. Thank you.
Parks and Recreation, John?
We have Resolution 2012-131 authorizing the Radnor Youth Basketball Apparel Award of bid. I would move for the approval.
Have a second?
Redo?
Redo.
Mulligan. I'm moving to approve the Resolution 2012-131 authorizing Radnor Youth Basketball Apparel Award of bid.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Commissioner comment, public comment, all those in favor?
Aye.
Passes 5-0 with 2 absent. Next, we have Finance and Audit.
I'm catching up. First up, I have, I'll move to approve the disbursement and acceptance and approval of the October 9th through October 22nd disbursement summary in the grand total of $2,545,483.73. That comes in 2 groups, 2012-10A in the amount of $1,002,359.51, and the other is 404. No, I missed one. Sorry about that. The groups don't add up. I apologize. Is Bill, should these, the very last line on the grand total, I thought I added that up before.
Well, what may be throwing you off is the electronic disbursements
Yeah,
total,
one-
which we
they
don't
add
add on the
1138
individual.
in. That changes the total.
Yeah, we summarize those on the summaries that come to the board.
These 3 all add up to that.
Gotcha. Yeah, just a little confused on my end. All right, well, the total is $2,545,483.73.
Second.
Commissioner comment, public comment, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0 with 2 absent.
Next up, I'll move to approve Resolution 2012-123. This is a resolution approving or further engaging Brown and Silbergeld as the Act 511 solicitors. Bill White, do you want to speak to this at all?
Sure. If you'll recall, back in July, we had received resignation from Brown and Silbergeld as far as our Act 511 solicitors, at which time the board agreed to appoint John Rice's firm as interim, and at the same time asked the administration to seek to find a replacement to segregate the legal work, not having it all go to Grimm, Bean, and Thatcher. So during that time, we re-engaged with Brown and Silbergeld, renegotiated our arrangement, and have come to an agreement on what you see in front of you tonight. The one thing I would like to note is the tremendous work that Grimm, Bean, and Thatcher did during the interim period. Dan Paci and John Rice were extremely helpful in assisting the township finalize 2 agreements that we've been working on for some time, so we do appreciate the work that they did. They really were, they did a great job, and they were good to work with.
All right, I appreciate it. And the tiered rates are to pay the appropriate fee for the type of work that's being done. It seems to me that would be saving some money here in the long run, but, you know, I don't have the rates from before, so I don't know.
The rates before were $165 per hour, regardless of the type of work that was being done.
I see. And so now it's spanning from 125 up to 250. But
Right,
it's
and-
still,
and
majority
most
of
of
the
the-
work is below that number.
Yeah, most of the work that we engage with them are resolved before we get to the civil complaint and get to the legal process. So we'll spend most of our time in the 125 to 165 an hour range.
I move to approve the resolution.
I have a second?
Second.
Raise your hand, who's second?
Don can have it.
Any other commissioner comment, public comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes 5-0 with 2 absent.
I'll move to approve Resolution 2012-126. This is to approve the lease agreement with Pitney Bowes for a mailing system and folder insertion system. And this is in the amount of $740.52. The previous contract was $792. And in addition, we'll save about $675 a year by not needing pre-printed envelopes.
You make a motion?
I already moved.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner comment, public comment, all those in favor? Aye. Passes 5-0 with 2 absent.
And my last is Resolution 2012-130. I'll move to approve Resolution 2012-130. This is further amending the 2012 operating and capital appropriations. And I'm going to have Bill White speak to this because there is some detail here.
Sure. What we're doing here, as we've done back in May and then in September, is amend the appropriations that are included in the fund, in the various funds. For this amendment, the biggest items that we're including now is cleaning up 2 major areas that were previously approved. One being transferring the funds from the general fund to the newly created stormwater management fund to pay for the stormwater study that AMAC has been authorized to proceed with. So that is the one transfer. That's $248,000. And then recognizing the various transfers out of the general fund into the capital fund, the pension funds, and the other post-employment benefit or obligation fund as approved by the board from the excess fund balances that existed back at 12/31/2011. And there's 2 different ways to go about recognizing that. We felt that the more transparent way was to actually appropriate for those transfers in the general fund so that you can see exactly where the money's going from and where it's going to. And when we go through the audit process, those will be reconciled against one another. The alternative method is to just post within the system the movement of cash from one fund to another, which would eventually show up buried somewhere in the financial statements, but it's not as transparent as this method. So we chose to actually go in, amend the appropriation budget to recognize the transfers. And with the board's approval of this legislation tonight, we'll actually have the budget in place to move the money.
Okay, I've moved the motion already.
Second.
Commissioner comment, public comment, all those in favor?
Aye.
Passes 5-0 with 2 not here.
That's it for me.
Okay, community development?
Very good. I move the approval of HARB 2012-19 for 219 Poplar Avenue.
I have a second.
Second.
Commissioner comment, public comment, all those in favor? Aye. Passes 5-0 for 2 not here.
Very well. I motion that we, I don't know the correct language here, but what's the language that you want for this one, John, for outdoor dining? Just refer.
Review and refer the ordinance.
The language for this ordinance for outdoor dining, what you want, a referral? How do you want me to word that?
Well, what has happened with this, it's been to the Planning Commission. I think there's been some revisions. Kevin did some substantial revisions to the initial draft in mid-September. What's in front of you is a September 14th draft. At this point, it's not ready to be advertised because it's got to go back to your local Planning Commission and it's got to go to the County Planning Commission since it's been revised fairly substantially from what we started with. So this is just to bless this and move it on.
Do we have to introduce a new ordinance?
You're not introducing this. You're just
Review and referral of this
reviewing
ordinance.
it and referring it on to the 2 planning commissions
So
for the reviews under the MPC.
I motion that we refer this to the ordinance 2012-09 to the 2 planning commissions.
Second.
Commissioner comment?
Yeah, I have 2 changes that I'd like to put into it. First is on page 4, item 9. I would like to strike the added hour on Friday and Saturday that allows it to go from 10 to 11 and just have it end, the hours of operation shall be 8 to 10 p.m. So that would be to preserve the current hours. So I'm going to make the motion that we preserve the.
Shouldn't you wait till it goes through the process to do that? I
No.
personally disagree.
No.
We should
let's
decide
just get
what
rid
it
of it
is.
now.
Yes, because
Is there a second
otherwise-
to his motion?
Yeah, I'll second it. It is best to do it now because otherwise it has to go all the way back through planning commissions again if we do it.
Yeah, but I'm
Now,
not going to try to,
it'll-
if you don't want to change it, then I'm not going to try to change
Yeah.
it. So this is for us, they've already decided they want to extend it to 11.
Okay, any other commissioner comment? Public comment? All those in favor?
Other
Now,
questions?
let's get
on-
this one out of the way. Let's knock them out one at a time.
This is
Go ahead.
just on the
Go ahead.
change.
Just on the change,
Yeah, go ahead.
So let me speak to that also. I support that because, again, you have residents that live up against this outdoor dining. You cannot imagine, unless you've been in that situation, you cannot imagine the impact it has on their lives. Yes, we want to improve opportunity for the restaurants. I'm pro-restaurants, pro-business, but I'm also pro-resident who are next door to these restaurants. So anything we can do to lessen the burden on the residents that live adjacent to these restaurants, and also keeping in mind that creating an ordinance that allows this to go later would in fact turn out to be a lot of complaints that we would have to field through the ComDev department and also through the commissioners and the police and everything else. So, in Garrett Hill in particular, I'm pro outdoor dining. What I want to do is make sure that if we have any outdoor dining, that it is completely compatible with the residential character of the neighborhood and that there's no negative impact. We want the positive impact of outdoor dining, but we don't want the negative. So I agree with Commissioner Curley's motion here to strike the additional hours of operation past 10 p.m.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed.
Okay. And then I have one other, number 10, I'd like to strike the Planning Commission added provision that would allow up to 12 seats without a distance regulation. And I'd like to strike that so that number 10 would read, no outdoor dining shall be established within 100 feet, instead of no outdoor dining with more than 12 seats shall be established in 100 feet.
I'll second that as well.
And
Commissioner,
then
comment?
my reasoning is similar to the last one, that this is, if 12 seats in the wrong place can be devastating to a handful of, it's a small number of people, but it can be quite a change to those residents.
Well, this is outdoor dining. This isn't a bar, it's outdoor dining. It's an amenity that the neighborhood has. Any public comment?
Well, I just want to also, my comments are identical to my prior comments, but, you have to think of this as 12 seats. That's 3 tables of 4. That's tables that normally have 4 seats, or it could be as many as 6 tables of 2. Again, if you had this right next door to your house, it could have a significant impact. The 100-foot requirement actually is very reasonable. Most of the restaurants in Wayne are at least 100 feet from residences, so it won't have any impact. Even in Garrett Hill, there are at least 1 or 2 businesses
They
there
have
that could
residents over
probably
top
still
of their
have.
stores, restaurants.
Well,
The residents over top, that doesn't trigger,
It doesn't.
someone living on top of a prospective restaurant doesn't trigger the protection.
That's right. These are for single-family dwellings and detached residential uses, so. Anyway, that's my comment.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed.
John, did you
Abstain.
vote?
I'm in favor.
So 3
I'm
to
in
2.
favor of Don's change.
It carries 3 to
Yeah.
2. Very good.
Kevin, I have a couple of questions, either for you or John, just so I understand how this is going to work. Because you and I have spoken about existing businesses that have done this for years. And I want to understand how that gets memorialized. Because you've said they're grandfathered in, but if, 5 years, 8 years from now, they want to sell their business, how does the buyer do their due diligence and know for a fact that they're buying a business that can be run in the same way it's being run today?
Assuming that this ordinance would be passed, what we would end up doing is then going back to all of those outdoor dining facilities that are currently in operation that we're aware of, that have been operating prior to the institution of outdoor dining regulations, and we would issue them then a certificate of nonconformity, which would then register them as a nonconforming use, at which point, when this becomes adopted, they would become nonconforming, and they'd be entitled to continue that nonconformity as long as that use remained on the property.
So do you register everything they do? For example, if they have an outdoor dining at the back of their restaurant and they have these propane overhead heaters that they use, will they be able to continue to use those?
We would register that it's a nonconforming use for outdoor dining and the number of seats that have been there. Outside of that, if there are some special parameters that we felt were warranted noting, but we'd probably try to keep it as simple as possible.
So if I'm selling my business, and I've got an ordinance on the books that says no overhead heaters, and I'm not registered with an overhead heater, how do I, as a buyer, know that I can continue to use those overhead heaters? Or does that use go away if you don't have it registered?
I think that would probably be something that would be subject to looking at as part of the existing non-conforming use. So
But how's
their
it-
operation in totality would make up that
But
non-conforming.
how is it documented?
Kevin,
There would be-
you're going to have, I mean, Kevin's going to have to document however they're operating, whether there's heaters, there's some setback criteria that they may be non-conforming with. All of that's got to be documented, the number of seats, hours of operation. So, I mean, it's so that if that restaurant gets sold to another operator, that they can continue as is. And then there's rules in the ordinance for expansion of non-conforming uses. If somebody wanted to come in down the road and do something more than what is there. So when the ordinance gets enacted, however they're operating gets frozen at that time.
So you would describe it as sort of, I'm going to put words in your mouth to process it the way I need to process it. It's incumbent on the owner to make sure that documentation of non-conforming use represents what he wants it to say.
Right.
So that he's got a documented record that says, this
Well,
is how I'm operating.
Not what he wants it to say, what's actually going on.
I'm sorry,
So-
fair enough.
You know, and there may be a plan that he has of the property that Kevin can use, but as much detail as possible.
Right, but for example, to pick up on what Kevin said, if he's currently using overhead space heaters,
Right.
he wants to make sure that in that documentation that says this is a non-conforming use, among my non-conforming uses are the use of
Right.
overhead space heaters.
Right. I mean, the key with this, and I don't know, I know Kevin's looked at some of the restaurants, is how did they initiate that activity? You can't, if you started doing something that was illegal when you started to do it, well, you don't get a nonconformity to continue something that wasn't correct or authorized under the ordinance at the time. So there's a little bit of, historical documentation that the property owners that have restaurants and are doing outdoor dining are going to have to
And
put
this-
forward. And we're going to accept probably pretty much whatever they give the township unless there's a reason not to accept it.
And the start date is what?
When the ordinance is enacted by this
This an
board.
ordinance or the first one that we passed allowing outdoor dining?
No, under this ordinance. This ordinance will establish the parameters for outdoor dining. We will then, under this ordinance, got to go through planning and come back to you, be introduced and enacted. Under this ordinance, then, Kevin will then go out and start documenting all the nonconformities.
So basically, anybody who ran their business this past summer,
Right,
that's sort of the assuming this gets done before next summer.
correct.
That's the condition that they will be allowed to continue operating under.
Assuming that what they were doing
Gotcha.
when they established it was authorized.
John, why is the, something like the use of a heater, why is that tied to the use of the property? The use of the property can be grandfathered, but not the particular regulations about whether to allow a heater. That's not my expectation.
Yeah. Well, if you don't have handicap accessible doors, you don't have to put handicap grandfather in. Once you go to make a change, then you got to put handicap accessible doors. So there's a lot of things that we have on the books as rules that you don't have to follow if you did it before the ordinance was passed. So the thing is that it's a nonconformity just like every other nonconformity, and if there's a dispute, they go to zoning hearing board and present their case.
Nonconforming uses are given some special status under
I
Pennsylvania
just
zoning
wouldn't
law.
I wouldn't expect the use of a heater to be I would think it's the non-conforming use of the property, not the
Broader.
particulars
But
of
you've
how.
explicitly,
broader.
number 12 prohibited.
Yes, that's why it's not my expectation that we would have to go back and allow things that we're not allowing, other than the use itself, but
It's broader. It's much broader than that.
Okay,
Yeah.
very good.
I mean, Anthony's coal-fired Peter wanted a heater, and we turned them down. But if they've been in operation for 50 years with a heater, it wouldn't even come before us. All right. What else we have? It's moved and seconded. We got the changes?
Original motion has been approved.
All right, any public comment?
Hi, Baron Gemmer, South Wayne Avenue. Don, thank you for those suggested changes, and I appreciate the votes on those. Just a few quick items, some more for clarification than anything else. In the preamble and some of the places, it talks about a licensed food establishment, and then later on it talks about a restaurant. I don't know if we have definitions that those mean different things, where like if you're serving it within a company facility, it's not considered a restaurant. So I do see that flipping back and forth, so that might be something that we want to look at. Secondly, along the lines of the grandfathering, which is an excellent point, and Kevin's clarifications are well taken, because one of the things, and I have a couple points on that, one of which is if people are understanding that when you are typically in the WBOD, you're going to be operating under the old rules as what they are, even though they're going to get deleted out of here because they'll get their certificate of nonconformity. But they're not going to get to play by these new rules unless they could meet the parking and fall under the entirety of the requirements.
If they want to,
They're not going to want to play by the, I mean,
yeah.
Well, but there's certain things in terms of the hours and things that they may like that they wouldn't be able to take advantage of under the old rules.
It's all or nothing.
Yeah.
You pick the set of rules you want to play under, and you play under that in its entirety.
That's the point I'm
Right.
making. But if they can't meet the parking, then they can't play under the new rules.
Right.
Correct me if I'm wrong there,
I'm sorry.
John.
Did you
well,
address the commissioner?
I think I disagree with you.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
not.
I mean, if the hours are being expanded under this new ordinance, then any of the outdoor dining areas are going to be able to take advantage of the hours,
If their seating's nonconformity, they don't have to change their
even
seating.
if they don't meet the parking part of the new regulations. It's not,
I'm more with John Nagel on this, where it's an all or nothing. You have to live by all the old requirements and old rules, or all the new requirements and new rules.
no,
And John, your opinion is that it's not for us to decide, correct? It's case law about what they're allowed to have or
Right.
not have.
right.
Correct.
And if there's, I mean, basically for some of these operational aspects, Baron, like the hours of operation, just take that's for an example. If the existing WBOD restaurants want to take advantage of the more lenient hours of operation, the greater, they're allowed to do it, even though they can't meet the other parts of this that's in here. They get the opportunity to operate under the new ordinance because they're outdoor dining.
Yeah, I guess I'm confused because I
Unless
know when
you
we change.
address the board.
Okay, when we change, I will, obviously Commissioner Spingle, but he'll be answering questions. We've seen this before when we've changed height requirements when we have different zoning districts and we change certain aspects. So that's why I'm confused by Solicitor Rice's answer, but obviously he's a solicitor, so.
Yeah. No, your nonconformities you're granted. Anything new you can take advantage of.
That
hear
is a very accurate
Yeah, okay,
statement of the
okay,
law
yeah.
of
So that's-
nonconforming uses.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can take advantage of anything that you can take advantage of. Doesn't mean you have to meet everything in the new ordinance. Things
Okay.
you can't meet, they're the nonconformities.
All right, go ahead.
Along those lines, too, if you, what section is this? Under 4A2, where it talks about if it extends into the right-of-way or the sidewalk. And I believe that's primarily only going to still apply to the WBOD because the outdoor dining would still need to be within the buildable area of the lot. I don't see anything that's saying it can be in a front yard, a side yard, or rear yard in this document. Is that, it's not preempting the definition of yard or where a structure can be in any manner there.
Go ahead.
Page you're on.
Oh, well, actually, it's page 2, and it was just more of a reference. Page 2, where it's under section 4, A, subsection 2, where it just says a minimum, let's see here, where it extends in, where the dining extends into the public sidewalk or right-of-way.
Yeah.
Primarily, there might be some exceptions, that's going to only apply to the WBOD.
No, there's other restaurants that have sidewalks in front of them.
Well, but
Radnor Hotel has a sidewalk.
isn't that in the WBOD still?
No, it stops at
okay.
St.
Well,
Catherine.
I guess let me refer specifically to the right-of-way portion, though, because I just want to. Another thing I want to clarify is this is not saying that in all the non-WBOD districts you can put these outdoor dining facilities in a side yard, in a rear yard, in a front yard. I don't see anything in here that's preempting the definition of a yard and where a structure can be. that would be required to do outdoor dining.
Well, some of them are going to be a side yard or rear yard. They have to have setbacks, you know?
That's what
Yeah.
Well, no, but if they can't, the setback is the side yard, so
Yeah.
unless I'm missing something, I don't,
I mean, new outdoor dining uses are going to have to meet this.
I understand, that's what I'm saying.
Right.
But where they could be located, I don't see anything in this document that preempts the fact that no structures and things could be in the side yard, rear yard, or front yard, which is under our definition of the buildable area and where it says no structures can be in any.
Baron, can you,
Sure.
you're using the word structures. Now, some of this outdoor dining will not be structures.
Yeah, but the permanent flooring will be, that by definition will be a.
Well, okay, but an existing sidewalk, is that?
Well, forget the sidewalk. Let's just say where it can be located, there's going to,
Well, wouldn't all that,
Yeah.
okay, so the
Yeah.
structures would be completely governed by the existing zoning code, so.
correct. Well, I'm just trying to see, is there an understanding that it can be in a front yard or a side yard or rear yard? And if so, then I just wanted to clarify how that
It can be, and there is a section that talks about the required setback.
Can I just make, Baron, this discussion is for the planning commission.
Okay.
I mean, because the planning commission is going to take what the board sends them, and they will probably make some changes. We're going to get Delaware County Planning Commission comments, resident comments, your comments, just to, because I'm not sure I understand the point you just made without seeing it applied to something, but I think that would make more sense. Tonight is just to get this process going. This is not the hearing.
Oh, no, and I understand that. I'm
Yeah.
just trying to understand what this is currently saying, even as is. And I'll leave that to the planning. Let me just maybe rephrase it very briefly. A lot of the restaurants may want to put an outdoor dining area in front of their building. But if their building is already built to the front yard line,
Can't do it.
they can't. That's the point I'm getting at. They can't put it in the yard itself. It still has to be within the buildable area in the middle.
right.
And I'm not sure people get that from this. They may think that they can put it wherever, particularly
When
I
they
mean,
come in
I
with their
don't get
permit-
that from
when
that.
they
I
get
don't
their
know
per-
if-
When they come in for their permit, we'll explain it to them. They can't put it there, okay?
But I don't, I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't, it wasn't my impression that that was accurate, that this could go in the front yard.
This doesn't grant any new zoning relief. So it doesn't,
You're still,
in terms of
you're still
building.
going to have the yard requirements.
Right.
So,
Baron, you did say
absent-
something,
Absent a zoning hearing board application.
Baron, you mentioned, your very first comment was that you felt that there was a disagreement between the definition of licensed food establishment versus restaurant. Is restaurant in the other code? The
No,
old code?
actually, I didn't say, pardon me if I misspoke.
Yeah, I misunderstood.
I just, both terms were used in this document, and I didn't know if they were meant to be used interchangeably. That was my comment.
Well, that's something we want to, I was actually, do you have any citations of where
Well,
restaurant?
the first one, the definition of outdoor dining uses a licensed food establishment, and then the next page, you can, let's see, if I see restaurant, I saw it a number of times, let me try and find it here.
Because we want the planning commission to pay special attention to that.
Yeah,
generally, that's-
I didn't mark any, but I saw probably at least three, I think.
I mean,
Oh, right here, on page 4, you go under number 8, it talks about any one restaurant, page 4, number 8, it ends in restaurant. There's a number of references to restaurant there. So that was my point, is just to make
Right,
sure that's.
well, we'll have John Rice will look that over a little bit when it gets to planning. I appreciate that comment,
Yeah.
thanks.
Okay, so, speaking then of front and side, and one of Commissioner Curley's concern was in trying to protect neighbors and saying that it can't be to the side or the rear if there's, and we'll get to the adjacent part, if it's near a residence and by the definition here. But I wasn't sure what was meant by the front, because if I could be in front of the building but also beside it, so kind of like catty corner. Is that considered beside the building, so the building's still not buffering it? Or does the dining need to be under what you would prefer, Commissioner Curley, between the front of the building and the front yard setback or the right-of-way or whatever the case might be?
That was my understanding. Kevin, are you going to support that? Is that your understanding also?
I'm not sure that I followed what was being explained.
Imagine a conventional building with a front, 2 sides, and a back, that the dining, if triggered by the protection that came out of what the Planning Commission recommended, that dining goes to the front of the building.
And my question was front defined in terms of it has to be between the front of the building and, let's say, the road is an easy example, or could it be in front of the building but off to the side, so it's more catty corner, so there's a direct, if you're in the backyard, you could still see the outdoor dining directly. Is that still in front of the building?
I had envisioned the more liberal definition of that, the entire front. So everything from the building forward is the front, and that's the location at which the dining can
Maybe
occur.
that just needs to be, I didn't know which way you meant, I just thought it was ambiguous the way it was.
Anything else?
Yes. And what triggers that, and actually, I think Commissioner Curley may have had a comment on this. Where it says, this is on page 4, continued on to page 5, number 10. The second sentence, outdoor dining shall not be permitted at the rear or side of a principal restaurant, well, there's a good example of restaurant building, when said building is immediately adjacent to an existing single-family detached residential use or residentially zoned district. First off, I think immediately adjacent is too vague. It's going to get us in trouble. Does that mean there can't be any structures in between? Does that mean there's no structures in between, but it's 400 feet away? What do we mean by immediately adjacent? I think we're better off with distance, like we did in the others, to do that. I just think that's just way too open to interpretation or misinterpretation.
All right,
So
what else?
And along those lines, the 100 feet, right now it basically is to residentially zoned districts. We have a large number of nonconformities in the township, both residential buildings in commercial districts and vice versa. And I know we're not going to deal with the second floor residential, and I'll have another comment on that real quick. But I would say for the folks that are nonconforming, and whether they're a split zone property or they have an existing single-family home in the middle of a commercial property, I would like to see added to the 100 feet distance, either 100 feet to the nearest residential district or to the nearest first floor residential use.
I think that's in there. I think that language protects the non-conforming residential property that is a residential property with no commercial use.
I wasn't seeing that.
All right, well, it's going back to the planning commission, so we'll...
Just to answer your question, Don, the 100 feet, it talks about the less than 12, and then the side part just says, that's the rear and the side talks about whether it can be residentially zoned or existing single-family detached. I don't even care about the single family. If you have a duplex where there's residential on bottom, residential on top, I think that should also have the distance in it, as well as an existing single-family home. That only triggers the side versus rear versus front. It doesn't trigger the 100-foot distance.
Have you made these comments to the planning commission yet?
We tried to, but never mind. I won't go into that. But yes, I did make some of these comments already.
Yeah. Well, we're not here to debate the whole ordinance. We're here to...
With all due respect, we keep hearing about how, and Commissioner Curley informs us about when it's going through the process, we have all these opportunities. And so if you're telling me this isn't an opportunity to change it, then we need to be noting that when the schedule comes out in terms of how it's going to go. Because once it gets changes, the document's going to have an inertia of its own, so whatever it goes through with here is going to be more powerful and harder to change the farther we go, which is why Commissioner Curley made his comments.
And I think you're right, and I think there's a lot. We did a lot of work to get to this point, and there's a few details. They're policy decisions for us, so I think you have to make them. But unfortunately, Barron, I disagree with you. I think that this provides the protection you want because essentially that whole building becomes the trigger. If you are adjacent to a building that outdoor dining shall not be permitted in the rear side.
It doesn't matter. If I have a residence right next door to it, fine, you put it in the front. It still might be 50 feet from my window.
Okay, I'm very well. I mean, I'm not in a position to make a change on that tonight.
Yeah.
So
it would be in the sentence before that, Don, where it would be no outdoor dining in a residential district. You would add first floor residential use if you were, in terms of what I'm suggesting, if that's how you want to do it.
All right, and I'm not even sure I want to make a change to that, but I know that I'm not going to make it tonight.
Barron, you're being specific about a duplex, like a bottom top type residential duplex. Whereas right now in the code, I'm just in this section 10 there,
He's not talking about duplex, he's talking about a business with a.
I'm
resident
trying to
on top.
exclude
And-
residences on top because
Yeah.
I know there's no way we're going to
He's
get
just
those. So
talking about
that's why I'm.
residents, first floor residents. He's not talking about
Thank you.
duplex.
That's
Okay,
exactly.
and we're-
That's.
I
Thank
mean,
you,
by,
Commissioner.
I know, I was not trying to include those when I made the changes that I solicited.
And I'm not trying to either.
Yeah, I don't want that to be a trigger. My thought is if you live in an apartment in this commercial area, then you accept the reasonable uses, and this is a reasonable use.
In a commercial where you're dealing the mixed use because you're on a second floor.
Yes.
I understand that. I'm
The
not
only
trying to
trigger
do-
would be a continuous and uninterrupted or a whole residential use. So there might not be any of those. I can only think of one, but that would trigger. But
a something in a commercial, we have I've even got that in Ward 6, there's, in commercial district, there's a, there's a duplex apartment. And that would not necessarily, that would not be protected under this
Yes.
because it's in a commercial
I mean,
CO.
I mean, that's my intent, that should not be protected, but, that's a policy decision.
it should not be
Should not be protected, that the protection would be limited to a residential use, a residential.
Single-family home he's
Single-family
talking
home,
about.
yes.
Okay.
Commissioners, the Planning Commission did discuss this at length, and I think that the thought was similar, that they were protecting the single-family home. And I know Barron did bring up these comments to the Planning Commission. They heard him, they just didn't recommend those changes to be put in there. So these issues were in front of the Planning Commission, which resulted in some of the changes that you see in the draft in front of you. They just chose not to implement the changes to the extent that I think Barron was looking for.
And let me add a better example, perhaps, to take away from the apartments. What was just preliminary approval for on the Adelberger property, those townhomes, those would not be protected from the distance under this ordinance because they're not single-family, but they are, most likely owner-occupied and, the same as a single-family home to anybody else, but they wouldn't fall under this.
Well, we're going to disagree, but I'm going to disagree with that one, too. So I think they would be protected by the 100-foot from the property line.
They would be protected because they're in a residential
Because
district,
they
but
have a property line and the protection
a
of the property
similar
line.
property
The
like
property
that.
line would trigger their protection.
yeah, but a similar property like that for similar use in a CO or something would not be protected, and that's
The level of detail that we're talking about, to me, this is a compliment to what you've done, is you've obviously, we've got something where we're talking about, we're getting into some very, very remote details because we've addressed a lot of concerns in this. So, I think it's appropriate for us to continue with this document that's before us.
all right. And then one final comment, which is along those same lines with the mixed use that is allowed in WBOD and C2 and might be allowed in other commercial districts. I know we're not going to protect those under this, but just realize, per the comprehensive plan, that could have a dampening effect on new units like that because you could build one and then next door somebody could put a restaurant in and be 20 feet from somebody's window, and that might decrease the value of that rental unit. So just as a policy decision, just realize that. I'm not
But
saying to do anything different.
That's a
but
double edge also because there's a lot of people that move into these neighborhoods in order to be next to these
I
kinds of
understand. Well,
establishments.
particularly now that you've changed it from 11 to 10, and that might certainly be
And if you
helpful.
want
in
a
that.
vibrant business district, you want to put as many residents around as you can. So if they're willing to live in a business district where a lot of people want to, downtown, Luella Court Mansion, they're
Yep.
going to pay $1 million each for those 12 units.
Yeah.
You get the restaurants.
My concern is actually more for the prior point, which is the folks that have been living in a commercial district in a single-family home, knowing the zoning around them doesn't allow anything outside except the parking lot, and now, things around them are changing, and they may not be protected if they're not in a residential district.
Fine.
Thank you very much.
All right. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes 5-0 with 2 absent.
Okay, I move the adoption of ordinance 2012-16, establishing Chapter 165 of Radnor Township Code Fire Marshal Investigation to delineate the role and authorization of the township fire investigator.
Second.
Commissioner comment? Public comment?
I've just questions. It sounds to me that we're creating a new role. I don't know who's going to want to speak to this. I guess Kevin. Could you
I can speak to this, yes.
It sounds like a new role. I recognize it's a part-time, as-needed role. Do we have any sense of the costs that might be associated with this new role? Because there's training costs, certification, service costs,
There actually are, these roles currently existing. You have the fire marshal and fire code official are synonymous with the same position. The fire investigator, who investigates the origin or the cause of the fire after it's and then you have the fire chief who was actually on scene during the emergency. So all of those positions currently exist currently, and this is just defining who's responsible for what portion of the process. The fire marshal, fire code officials involved in the plan review, the fire chiefs are involved in the fighting of the fire investigator is involved in determining the cause of the fire. And this is just putting those terms and those positions in a formal document now to identify who's responsible and when.
So we're not spending funds to train anyone or?
Correct. These positions already exist.
Excuse my ignorance, I didn't realize we already had a fire investigator. I knew we had a fire marshal and fire chiefs, of course.
I think the fire investigator, Don, has been kind of fire investigator, fire marshal. That term fire marshal goes back and has some history, but in accordance with the building codes, the fire marshal is the fire code official, and that would be the building code officials in my department.
Very good.
Don, you moved it, seconded. Public comment. All those in favor? Aye. Passes 5-0 with 2 absent.
I move the introduction of ordinance 2012-15, establishing a new Chapter 10 of the Radnor Township Code of Ordinances, establishing regulations and permit requirements for certain types of temporary signs, and prohibiting aerial advertising over the Township of Radnor, and to set a date for a public hearing.
And what would the date for the public hearing be?
Mr. Rice? At our next meeting?
Your next meeting.
At our first meeting in November?
November 12th.
November 12th.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner comment? Public comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes 5-0 with 2 absent.
And I motion that we authorize John Rice to attend the zoning hearing board meeting regarding appeal number 2877.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner comment? Public comment? All those in favor? Aye. Passes 5-0 with 2 absent. Thank you, Don. Next, Public Works. We have a resolution to accept the lowest qualified bid for road de-icing salt. The low bidder was Oceanport Industries. The price is $55.24 per ton delivered to Township. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Can I have a second?
I have a question,
Second.
Steve, I'm surprised that we came in less than the state. Any
Yeah, we're very fortunate. We're below the state contract price and considerably less than last year's price.
explanation?
I don't have one. Happy to say it, but I don't have a quantifiable explanation.
We didn't lose a lot of salt last year, so
Right.
they have a lot left over.
It could be supply and the lack of demand from last year.
Right. Any other commissioner comment, public comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 5-0,
Excuse
2
me,
absent. Yes.
I think that I skipped over item F. I don't have
What's
it
that?
checked off. Did I do that? Which
Yes,
is
we
the
did.
No, we did
We
that.
did that, yes.
the certificate of appropriateness.
Yep. Okay, next, resolution awarding a contract to Lantoga Road, for Lantoga Road sewer rehabilitation. And it's the Lantoga Rehabilitation Pro Pipe Corporation for $149,975. Lowest
So
qualified
moved.
bidder. Do I have a second?
Second.
Raise your hand the second.
Second.
Okay, Don. Commissioner comment? Public comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes 5-0 with two absent. Next, we have a emergency repair to the Willows Mansion for the solarium roof in the amount of $5,800. J. Miller Roofing, can I have a motion to approve that emergency repair?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner comment?
Bob, just a brief explanation as to the details.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Curley.
Just a few sentences on the reason behind this request.
Yes, the roof's been leaking for some time. The last storm, the leak got considerably worse. We're still renting. The Willows and the solarium is heavily used. So our Band-Aid fixes have not worked up to this point. So we asked for the emergency repair to that roof to get that done and sealed off.
Public comment? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes 5-0 with 2 absent. Next, we have the caucus for home properties. Home properties here.
Yes, sir.
Good evening, Neil Stein, attorney for Home Properties. With me is Bill Reardon, our consulting engineer. This is an application for land development. It's been filed as a preliminary and final application. It relates to the Broadlawn Apartments and specifically a request to construct a fitness center of approximately 1,165 square feet. The site itself is approximately 20 acres. You can see the areas of new construction highlighted in yellow. It is less than 2% of the total site area, and believe it or not, this application actually results in a decrease in impervious cover on the site. It has a profoundly, or will have a profoundly positive impact on the residents of this community. It will have no adverse impact whatsoever, either within the community or beyond its boundaries. It is for residents of this community only, therefore it will not have any adverse traffic impact. It will not have any traffic impact at all. During the course of this process, as I indicated, it was initially submitted as a preliminary and final plan. The application so notes, and we have submitted a formal waiver request to have it considered as a preliminary and final plan, our understanding being that your ordinance does not currently create a classification for a preliminary and final plan. However, given the fairly minor, the very minor nature of the construction that's being proposed, we think it's appropriate. The plan is, to my understanding, clean with regard to engineering issues and engineering detail. All internal agency approvals have been obtained, as well as all external agency approvals, including DEP and the Conservation District. So if it were to come back in a two-stage process as a final plan, you would see absolutely no difference whatsoever between that that you're looking at currently and that which you would review as a final plan. It would be important for us, however, given the onset of cold weather in the not-too-distant future, to get this started and completed as quickly as possible, and I think the residents of this community would be tickled pink if we were able to do so. And we're happy to answer any questions you may have, understanding that this is a caucus.
Kevin, do we have any problems with this project?
I don't think we have problems with the project. The process in the ordinance does not clearly define a preliminary final process, and we're in the process of going through that ordinance amendment. This issue came up at Planning Commission, and it was determined that without trying to redo the ordinance prior to the ordinance being redone, that we would follow the guidelines that are currently in front of the commissioners with the ordinance language as it is.
So Kevin, just to be clear, your recommendation is not to approve it as preliminary final, just as preliminary, if I'm reading it correctly.
Correct.
There was an issue about 2 parking spots that were interfering. Has that been resolved?
It has been resolved, Commissioner. The applicant's engineer has provided details that show that left-turning movements as well as right-turning movements into and out of Charles Drive will not impinge on the 2 parking stalls. I have a call into the fire marshal. I just want to verify that he has no any other issues that I'm not aware of at this point in time. But from an engineering point of view, we have no objection.
Okay.
Now, you've stated that this is solely for the use of the residents, the renters of the properties.
That's correct.
John Rice, how do we make sure that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, when we have a change of management, that stays the case? Because there's a terrible parking problem at home properties.
And that it's not open to the public?
Right.
I'm sure Mr. Stein and I can figure out a way to restrict this land development either by a note or some other way. Any objection, Mr. Stein, to doing that?
I share Mr. Rice's confidence. I'm sure we can work out something that's mutually acceptable.
That's my only concern. I see it as a real positive addition to the development.
Is there any public comment?
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yeah.
I know in looking at the property there, there's a home property sign there that sits out there, whether or not you would consider actually redoing that sign and actually adding, welcome to Radnor Township as part of that, as a gateway type situation. And that's something I think that probably the 2 attorneys can work on something. it'd be
I'm sure if the board were willing to grant a preliminary and final approval, that discussion would probably go a lot easier.
I'm sure our sign would get much bigger, too, as well.
Not bigger, but nice.
Right, well, okay,
I'm
so-
willing to support that if the sign's decent and.
All right, so right now,
Well, there's been a lot of improvements, home
right
properties,
now,
since they've
we're
taken
talking
over,
about
done
them coming
dramatic.
to our next meeting for preliminary and the meeting after that for final. Is that what we're talking about?
Unless you combine them.
I'd like to make a recommendation, we combine the two.
I agree. I mean, preliminary final is to make sure that after the preliminary, we have a chance to do all the administrative work before we do the final. But if the staff and everybody's on board, there's nothing else to do, why should we spend an extra 2 weeks on this? So I would support a preliminary final at our next meeting and pass it.
Kevin, do you have any objection to that?
I don't agree in principle. The concept is something that we felt was a lacking provision in the ordinance, which is why we are working to develop language to permit that specific thing under a strict set of guidelines that projects would need to meet and qualify for. Obviously, if it's something that you feel that this project qualifies for, then I would have no objections to that.
We did it with the St. David's Bank, right? Did we do a preliminary final for the bank?
There has been a history of some preliminary final
Yeah,
approvals.
but we just did one. Yeah, so your
Kevin,
working ordinance is not in effect now.
Kevin, the more poignant question, you said you're looking at some criteria. Do you believe that this meets the criteria that you're currently thinking of?
We haven't worked through all of that criteria.
Well,
One of
I
them was
understand.
zoning compliance. Any grading, stormwater issues would get caught under the grading permit application. There would be no relief needed from the zoning hearing board, which I believe is
Right.
something that this project would comply with.
You
Without going
haven't
through.
introduced an ordinance.
Not yet, no.
Okay, all right. So we're not guided by an ordinance. If we can do a preliminary final if we want to.
Absolutely.
Yes, and
So
I would
I-
add, just in support of your position, that and Kevin, you tell me if you disagree, but it looks like the 6 conditions that you identify are all very conceptual. So they would be consistent with that concept of that they're easy to meet those 6 conditions. Those are the 6 conditions on page 4 of your memo.
John, this is a caucus. Can we vote on whether preliminary final or
So
not?
my sense is you just get a sense of the board.
Yeah, I mean, if the board is, the majority of you are fine with that, then the resolution you see back from the staff
All right.
will say
especially
that.
since they're going to be so cooperative
We may
about
want
a
to leave
sign.
Bob
That's absolutely
and
right.
the owner the leeway to negotiate their discussion.
So
before we make
I
that
was one
commitment.
of the commissioners that pushed for the separation of the preliminary and final, primarily on the more complex and large development plans. This, to me, is very minor, and the fact that there are minimal conditions that seem to be, as one characterizes conceptual, I'll support.
All right, the sense of the
combining
board for
process.
preliminary final?
Well, let me just say, though, that we are going to see every applicant that comes in front of us between now and when that ordinance gets passed is going to be asking for this.
That's why we're over 21. We can make that decision.
I'm just saying, I'm happy to support it because this is very simple, and this is the type of plan that should fall under the ordinance. But I hate setting a precedent when this will
There's
come.
no precedent set. Nobody's entitled to it.
Fine.
You have to vote each time.
We'll see it again and again, every
Sense of the
applicant.
board was...
Hold on, Bob, do you have an
Well,
opinion?
Yeah.
No, I think this does. I know, taking into consideration Kevin's concerns, but I think this is one that it very much fits within that criteria of both to be completed. So I would recommend that we move this forward, and especially since they agreed to do the sign, I think that's a nice gesture on
Has he
their
agreed
part.
to do that?
You bet.
There we go.
Okay, thank you. Any public comment?
Can I just make one other comment?
Sure.
Mr. Stein, there's in the letter here an extension, 30-day extension to reach a decision regarding the waiver request. But is there an extension for the board to make the decision on the preliminary/final until the end of November?
If you need one,
Okay.
I'll give you one.
Well, you're being televised, so you would agree
Yes.
on behalf of the applicant that we have that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Next, we have a resolution of 615 Newtown Road to subdivide 13.6 acres into, it says preliminary, to 8 residential lots, retain existing residents of 615 Newtown Road. I'll move the approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner comment? Public comment?
Hold on.
All those-
hold on.
Well, I'm not quite
A little too
ready to
fast.
vote.
I wasn't, at my own loss, I wasn't present for the caucus. Bob Zinkowski, are you satisfied on this project that they're doing everything that meets your requirements, needs? Because this is the preliminary approval. This is on the 615 Newtown Road?
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
I have a question for the applicant. Hello, how are you?
Hi, George Brosman, representing the applicant.
I watched the zoning hearing board presentation. It was very interesting. And my question is about the easement. On the resolution that we have in front of us, it says that the restriction will be to the rear of lots 1, 2, 3, and 4, equal to the front yard setback area reduced as a result of the variance relief if it's granted. And my question is why 5, 6, 7, 8 aren't included? Or is that just a wording? That's where the easement, well, why don't you explain it to me and then?
Well, this condition came up at the Planning Commission when we were there. We spent a lot of time speaking about it. It was a compromise solution that the Planning Commission came up with and that we accepted. What we tried to explain was that the waiver and the front yard setback that we're requesting was intended to preserve the streetscape, if you will, the scenic road corridor along Newtown Road. What we were trying to do on the other side of the road was to preserve the estate house, which we have done. And there's also a riparian stream buffer back there behind those other lots. So these two conditions, 3 and 4, work together to address that. When we calculated the area, if we obtain the front yard setback relief, which we do not know if we will obtain, but if we, when we calculated that relief that we would get, that would cover a strip along Newtown Road. There wouldn't be remaining space to put back behind the other lots. Having said that, we were asked, well, would we also agree to an additional restriction behind those lots to put into a covenant the riparian buffer protection in that area? So if you add those two areas together, we're actually would be giving a lot more than the amount of relief, if any, that we get from the zoning hearing board. So the riparian buffer comment in number 4 addresses the lots on the opposite side of our proposed road. The comment number 3, the condition number 3, addresses the lots 1, 2, 3, and 4.
So
That's
is
why the difference.
The riparian buffer will be just the already protected, the 35 feet?
Yes.
So what are you easing? I mean, what are you protecting if it's already protected with an easement?
Well, it's not protected with an easement. There's an ordinance requirement.
Right, if it's protected by the ordinance, what is the easement protecting?
The easement would codify, if you will, or make as a private restriction what the ordinance has. So the ordinance could change. Somebody could request relief from the ordinance. This would be a private restriction running to the benefit of the township that would say that, these are the rules. You can't go in and get relief, I guess, unless the township would say otherwise. So we actually have an exhibit, I think it was in your package, but if you add up the areas, it's more than the relief we would get from the front yard setback. And we also have the entire area across Route 320 Sproul Road, which is over an acre, that is going to be restricted in some fashion as well. So there's whatever relief we get from the zoning board, we're giving back way more through these conditions than any relief we would get.
No, I get that, and I'm glad to see that you are doing it. I'm really, and the zoning board as well really picked up on this issue and saw that a real need to protect the natural features, if that's the whole point for the variance. I still am a little I mean, I just don't see protecting a riparian buffer as really adding any additional protection, because you can't build there anyway. And if our riparian buffer ever changed, it would be to make it bigger, not to make it smaller. So, be that as may, I'm not going to nitpick about it, because I do realize that the net gain in protection is offsets what you're gaining with the setbacks. But I would have preferred to see a little extra riparian buffer, because 35 feet is not actually a great riparian buffer in our ordinance, and this is a really environmentally important parcel.
Well, our clients have to sell the lots, so they were comfortable with what was in the ordinance. And if we get the waivers and the front yard variance, we'll be able to stay away from that area, which will be a plus.
Any other commissioner comment? Any public comment? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes 5-0 with one abstention, excuse me. One
Thank you.
absent. Thank you very much. 6-0, I'm sorry. I'll go through them. Public safety? Personnel and administration? Library?
No report.
Public health?
No report.
Old business? New business? Public participation? Motion to adjourn. Second? All those in favor? Aye.